Hey, Colab Coach here yet again with the casual conversations with wonderful people. Today, I have a special guest. Not only is she changing the game and making the world a better place in Ghana, West Africa, she's also my cousin. So I wanted to introduce you and thank you, Jewel, for joining me this evening.
Happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm
Awesome.
excited to share this journey.
Yes, yes. So the topic today that we're discussing is long distance relationships. Long distance relationships. And it's been a topic that a lot of people discuss on a daily basis. You see it on social media a lot. Does it work or does it not? So Jewel, I wanted to ask you, do you feel with well, let me ask you this first. Have you experienced long distance relationships?
Yes, I would say that majority of my longer term relationships have been long distance. It started for me when I was in university. I think I was in my last year of university, and I happened to travel to Ghana,
Mhm.
and I I met people. And of course, when back in those days, we were all adding each other, feverishly on Facebook. And so he ended up, reconnecting with me on social media and we just kept in touch. And then from there, it developed into a relationship.
Mhm.
And at the time, he was between Ghana and Italy. And although we were young, he would take time to actually come and see me in the States. So when I was in Atlanta still, he would come and visit. And that was like my first foray into an actual long term or long distance relationship as well.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting because you went straight from out of university into like a long distance relationship. Um, so in your opinion, would you say the cliche that long distance relationships don't work, or do you feel like there is a possibility to make those long distance relationships work?
So let's say take it like this. I'd rather say that long distance relationships are not for the faint of heart.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is the simple fact that your heart has to be in it 100%,
mm,
to the point where everything around you that can serve as a distraction will not be your distraction.
mm,
So, what helps for me, I think, is because if we go back to like, maybe not even, I wouldn't even say it's a part of my love language, but I just enjoy talking, right? And getting
mm,
to know people.
mm,
That's my thing. So I can spend hours and hours on the phone with somebody that I'm interested in. And that fulfills me in so many ways, that level of intimacy. So I feel like when we're telling each other stories or I'm getting to know about your day and you're actually descriptive with it, not it was fine, but we're getting into the crux of the day. You're telling me about people, maybe that I've never met, introducing me to new characters in your world.
yeah,
That excites me and it makes me feel like I'm there, but that's me. And
yeah.
so it would work for me to have that type of relationship, and then it could still be intimate for me because I feel connected to this person. For
Hmm.
others who are more of like the physical touch
Yeah.
and they need to have you in their space, it's a little bit more challenging. So you have to strengthen your heart to be able to say, I can move beyond, what I expected for myself. Like this is what brings me true joy, and I can balance it out with an alternative way of creating an intimate connection with this person I care about.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with you because of the fact that I think it's important that you have to be aware of yourself and you're aware of what kind of love you're looking for. Because you said if communication is what you're looking for and you like those conversations, then long distance relationships will be a little bit less stressful. But then if you are a type of person that needs someone to be there around you to touch, or you need them around to do acts of service and things of that nature, where you could see them doing it, then that long distance relationship might not be for you. Yeah, just to follow up a question from what you said. So you're saying that for you, it was more of the communication aspect. Did you feel like you got to the point where communication was just not everything, like you needed something more, or were you completely fine with communication in those long distance relationships?
So for me, when it came to communication,
Mm-hmm.
beyond communication, of course, there comes that feeling of like, okay, so how do we connect beyond this? How do we share or create moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And back then, we didn't really have, and I say back then like I'm super old, but we didn't have like a Zoom. I don't even think was FaceTime there. I don't know what we used to Skype. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, we would get on Skype so I can physically see you. And then, from there, sometimes maybe you can watch a show together, talk about it. My partner at the time was really romantic because I guess I was a nerd. So I like to read. So we would buy the same book and then read up to a point and then come and have a chat about it. Things that allowed us to connect. And then, of course, building up that passion for one another so that when we would see each other in person, it would be an entirely different experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a balance there, and it worked because I think at the time I was with someone who understood
Mm-hmm.
and valued me enough to engage with me in a way that maybe was also different for them, but it helped them to grow because again, I'm a talker.
Yeah.
So it's like you're always going to feel that energy around me, but when I'm in a good mood. Now, though, that's me being honest about the highs
Uh-huh.
because there were lows,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
there are a lot of lows that can come with that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Because it, as you said, it's about your preference. So if you're a type of person, okay, yes, I enjoy conversations, but at the same time, Skype is there. Let's do Skype, or let's bond over books, or let's bond over TV shows and things of that nature. That's something that could be discussed as well. So a question that I was thinking about for you is when you were going through those X amount of times not seeing that partner at that time, did it get awkward when you guys actually met in person, or do you feel like you guys just jumped into the same type of energy that you were having long distance?
That's a good one. I'm trying to remember the emotion I felt when I finally got to see him in person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was that bit of awkwardness because when I did meet him for the first time in person, it was kind of in passing. It wasn't like a big connection. We hung out and all of these things. It was like in passing, knew the same people, and hey, I remember you. I'm gonna add you on social media.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for the most part, we just had, pictures and Skype and the phone. But
Mm-hmm.
seeing the person in person again can kind of throw you off
Yeah.
because, maybe you physically expect them to look a little different than what you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an adjustment, I think, for both of us. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're a little bit taller or shorter than I expected. Okay, cool. Let
Mm-hmm.
me readjust my eyes, to envision you differently or take you
Yeah.
in differently. Um, and so I would say there was a buildup and excitement, but sometimes like your perception of something from a virtual space is very
Mm-hmm.
different from when you get in person. So it's almost like we had to recreate or rebuild that intimacy. It for us in particular, I don't think that happens to everybody,
Yeah.
but for
Yeah.
us, with being very young, it was like, okay, how do we adapt now that you're actually in my world? Because before it was almost part fantasy, of
Mm-hmm.
being in each other's worlds. But
Yeah.
now it's like, oh, this is the real world. So how does this really work? What do you look like when you wake up? Like, all of these things were things that you're readapting to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point, because it's like I like the fantasy aspect you said, because once you're because I've been in long distance relationships before in the past as well, and it's like once you have a perception of someone from a distance, you're like, I can't wait to meet this version of that person that I've been waiting for. But as soon as you meet them, you're like, oh, if they don't fit the exact idea of who you thought they were going to be, they'll throw you off. And it's like, okay,
Exactly.
do I need to readjust who I want to be in a relationship with, or am I okay with what I'm seeing? So I think,
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's really powerful. So just to go a little bit deeper, what would you say is like the red flags that you've noticed that you don't like from like a long distance relationship?
Mm. When it came to the lows of a long distance relationship for me, I think what was difficult was, again, separating fantasy from reality.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, with the distance, there's time to just be in your world. And I keep saying, like, comparing it to your world and a fantasy world because it's very different. But there comes to a point when someone meets you in person, and now that you're in their space, you see all of their habits, all of their being. It's no longer this I ideal. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Now it's no
Yeah.
longer the ideal, because we're always going to show up with a pretty good representative if we're just talking on the phone, if we're saying the things we want to hear, if I'm there to talk to you when I'm down, you're my upper when I've had a bad day. It's sweet, it's still nice, it's
Mm-hmm.
romantic.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing all this sweet stuff, and then we get in person and the day is a little bit difficult. You come home from work, maybe they're staying with you for a little bit, you're home from work, and now your day is really frustrating, and your usual kind of, let's say, go to decompressor or whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
is to just be by yourself. And then now you have this person here, and you can't just be like, wait, let me have my moment and then I'll talk to you. But they're
Yeah.
really there and you have to engage and just readjust. So for me, that was kind of that transition of trying to just adapt to actually having a person be a part of who you are. Because I think the other value we like sometimes, and let me not say we, but me, I liked, was
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I still like my freedoms and my space.
Yeah.
So being in that long distance relationship gave me that freedom and space to be and not necessarily be fully accountable to somebody else. And now that you're in my space, I have to readjust those freedoms that I had to now be accountable for how you feel, what you need for the day. And, again, that's sometimes that level of selfishness that diminishes when you actually have a physical in-person relationship. But when you are long distance, you still have that, you still haven't learned to not be unselfish just yet. You still have your time, your space to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think that's the real big component of it all that a lot of people, well, people who have not been in long relationships lose sight on, is the fact that yes, you're in a relationship with someone, but most of the time it's through conversation, through Skype, through whatever it may be, video, time, FaceTime, and things of that nature. But once the phone is off, once the communication is over, you can't help to be like, well, I'm still got to do me. I'm still doing what I got to do. I'm still focusing on things. And it's I don't want to say it's like you're in a relationship and you still also have singleness components, but at the same time, it's like you're not with that person all day, every day. You're not seeing that person on a daily basis. It's kind of like, well, yeah, I'm in a relationship, but at the same time, I'm still living my life as if I'm single. And that's it can the lines can be blurred. It definitely can be blurred at times, and I definitely experienced that as well. I guess the big question I have for you, I just have two more questions. This is probably the second to last one. The second to last question is, would you ever like do a long distance relationship again from what you experienced?
Oh, definitely. I think it's doable.
Mhm.
I think knowing what I know now, I know myself.
Yeah.
And I know myself in a long distance relationship, and I know myself in an actual, like, in-person
Mhm.
relationship, like where I'm with this person every other day. And so it's 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 more so, why what would I need to ask myself for the long distance? So it would be a matter of the level in which we are in our relationship.
Mm.
So right now, even with the age that I'm at, I don't have my children just yet, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have that family unit. So perhaps I'm saying that right now because that family unit isn't there. But
Mhm.
if I have children, or when I have children, then that dynamic might look different. I might need my partner to be there a little bit more than it being me being okay with them being somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because that's something that type of bonding and intimacy is something I value highly.
Yeah.
Opposed to just me being by myself and my partner being by themselves. So even right now, my current relationship, whilst my partner and I are in the same country, he has to travel for work, and
Mhm.
that's internationally. So
Yeah.
there's months of time now that he's gone.
Mhm.
So we have to talk and communicate every day, to keep that fire or that level of intimacy in our relationship going.
Yeah.
Because of course you can get so wrapped up in your work or whatever you're doing that you forget, oh, okay, I'm in the relationship, right? This is
Yeah. Yeah.
relationship. So how
Yeah.
do you plan? I mean, we're in a whole new world now, but how do you plan a virtual date night? How do you
Mm.
plan time to talk about the things that you care about or your day? How do you make it interesting and spicy enough where it's no longer mundane of, hey, how are you? I'm fine. Oh, okay, that's great. Because we had moments like that where we were like, what is going on? It's
Yeah.
getting dry. Like, where's the excitement?
Mhm. Mhm.
How do we get or reinvigorate this relationship when, again, the weight of the world is around you, and now you can easily fall off. It becomes more difficult, especially when you've started in person, and
Yeah.
then now you're in this experience of this space of being long distance. So you have to just be readapt, and really really want it, because it's easier to say no, especially in our generation now. It's so much easier to just simply walk away from
Yeah.
things that seem like more work, than needed.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are powerful, powerful things to hold to and keep in mind, especially for anyone that is starting a long distance relationship or has been in a long distance relationship. Um, Speaking of that same topic, I guess my last question for you is subtopic. My last question for you is, what advice would you give to someone that has just started a long distance relationship or is in a long distance relationship? What is something that you learned throughout your journey that, okay, if I knew this, it would have been easier, or if I learned this, then maybe I would have fall back a little bit more beforehand. What are some things that you realized was really beneficial while you were doing that?
Definitely. I think because I've had long distance relationships at different points in my life, when I was
Mhm.
really young, I would say, and then kind of getting there midway, and now where I am, not to say I'm an old lady or anything, but
You're still young. You're
I
still
think
young.
it's important to know thyself.
Hmm.
Still young, still living. Know thyself,
Hmm.
because if you don't know who you are, right, what you want, what you desire, what you value, you're going to enter into something with a certain level of expectations for someone else to fulfill aspects of yourself that you aren't aware of, right? Or you aren't clear of. So you're going to be expecting that your potential partner knows you more than you know yourself.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult to balance that. That was a big challenge I had in my first relationship, was that I didn't know my own trigger points of what exactly was stressful for me and how I end up showing up when I am stressed
Hmm.
and I don't communicate it well. And that became a detriment in my relationship, because now I was angry at something that had nothing to do with my relationship, but I didn't know how to communicate that effectively.
Yeah.
And then the other person feels a little bit rejected, and then y'all aren't talking about this rejection, and now there's an awkwardness with the one thing you all have, which is
Hmm.
communication.
Yeah.
And so it just grows, it begins to develop tension or create tension where there shouldn't be one.
Hmm.
And I wish I would have had more authority around myself. Like, who am I? What do I need? How can I express that? And that's not easily something to grapple, which is why I say long distance isn't for the faint of heart, because it requires work. And if you
Yeah.
haven't done that work within yourself to be a little bit comfortable with that, it wouldn't be an easy undertaking. And then knowing that about your partner, which kind of maybe comes into like point two, is like, also know who you're with,
Yeah.
right? Who are they? What are their quirks, ups,
Yeah.
downs, behaviors? I mean, you're not going to know that all the way off top, but recognizing it so that when they show up, maybe not quite as their best selves, you're patient enough to accept that, right?
Yeah.
You're patient enough to understand that. I think that we also have to learn to work within the silence. So I think for my relationship, even recently, like I said, there were moments where we'd be like, whoa, 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 this is kind of getting very mundane, very performative. Like, I'm gonna check in, you check in, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
But we were afraid to work within the silence, which is like, okay, maybe sometimes we don't have something to talk about. We're realistically right now, we've gone through a pandemic. We have so much on our minds. We're not the same. And so we're still shifting and operating in our own world. So it's okay if one day we're quiet. It's okay if there's nothing to talk about in that moment. Let's just be all right with that and not make it seem like something's wrong with us.
Yeah.
Let's accept that. But that's a very big, mature decision or understanding to come to, because when it happens, you automatically want to feel like something's wrong.
Yeah.
Even when it happens for maybe a couple of conversations at a time, and it might not be the case. And then I think the next part of it is make it fun. Don't forget intimacy, right? So sometimes make sure that you're not treating your relationship like your good girlfriend or your good guy friend that you call every now and then to just kind of kick it with, or just with, as we say in
Yeah.
our side of the world, right? How do you create intimate bonds with your partner? What does that look like for the both of you? What can you agree upon that can continue to allow you to develop new experiences with your partner? So again, I can take that from some of my very early relationships where, again, it was, exchanging books and reading together or coming back to talk, because that's what we liked to do. Then, of course, surprise trips, if you can, to go see the person, setting up like a date night virtually, like I do now sometimes, where you'll sit, talk, drink, whatever it may be with one another. This may also look like you setting up something special for them wherever, right, as a surprise. Just little acts of kindness, whatever you can do to continue to surprise each other, engage one another, and build deeper bonds with one another. And for those that are in the position where they have, sexual relationships, figuring out what that looks like as well, from an intimate perspective when you can't be in person.
Yeah.
And so, and then I forget the most important part, when you're, spiritual, praying together, like there's so much that you can do. And we forget those activities because we put so much pressure to just be able to communicate again and again and again. And it's like, no, let's make sure we are intentional about how we're developing this relationship. And I think you had asked me before about red flags, and I bypassed that. But the moment that you realize something about, and this is where know yourself comes into play, when you realize something's making you unhappy, express it, talk about it, work it out, so that you all can determine if this is something that can persist or if it has an expiration date. And what I mean by that is, what are we working towards?
Yeah.
I cannot be long distance with you for 3 years, right? 4 years. It's not feasible. Or are we saying, we know that, hey, maybe you're on a military base, or hey, maybe you have this contract, or hey, maybe you have this. And so we know there's an expiration date by the end of this, and we have plans for what happens when it does expire, so that we know what we're doing. But it can't be something that's just ongoing and there's no real plan towards what we're doing with this long term. And we both know our limits. So if I know I can only do this for about a year, you're aware of that, right? So that we can at least be honest with ourselves and see if it's something we can handle. And if not, we then can reflect on what might be better positions for us as individuals, so that maybe we can flourish in another type of relationship that works better for us. But at least have a plan that you all can focus on together, and everyone's participating, equally in that. It's not one person with the plan. I'm tapping my hand on I'm slapping my hand because I do that. I'll think of something on my own. I just got in trouble for that, but and not communicate it. But this is something, again, that I've come to learn. So yeah.
Wow. I mean, you dropped so many jewels. I have to pick them up from the ground. I mean, it's just been so much. It's been I'm mystified. I mean, yeah. I mean, know yourself, know your partner. Make sure that you guys are in agreement with what you decide on doing in a relationship, because the relationship is for both of you. You know, as you highlighted, that you can't just plan stuff or you can't just do stuff thinking that your partner's gonna be okay with it, especially long distance. You guys have to make an agreement. It's like, okay, when's the dates gonna start? When are we gonna do this? When we spending time? And also, as you said, if things are falling short, address it. Don't just let it persist. And when it persists and it keeps growing, and you're like, well, is this even worth it? And at the same time, before you even step into a long distance relationship, know exactly what you're stepping into. Instead of you just thinking that, as you said, is a fantasy, put the reality into the long distance relationship and realize if this is for you. So, oh man, Jewel, this conversation was amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for your openness and honesty about everything. Um, yeah, I definitely will have you back again to talk about more topics. We haven't even touched your whole business aspect of life, because you got a lot of things going on with business. So. um, but yeah, thank you so much, and we will talk soon. Have a good evening.
Sounds good. Goodbye. Good evening.
You.